Hello and welcome to the fifth segment in TechMar's SNOMELT training webinar series. This segment again looks at the SNOMELT Control 654, but this time we're going to take a specialized look at some of the new features that this control offers. The features we're going to look at in this fifth training segment, which is titled Feature Set 1, are those features that relate to the sequence of operation. We're going to start by looking at the temperature set points. What is the idling operation? What are those set points? Same for melting. And we'll introduce you to the storm operation, which is a new temperature set point for the TechMar SNOMELT Control 654. We'll look at warm weather shutdown and cold weather cutout. We'll look at different on-off methods. And lastly, we'll look at multi-zone systems. The following set points are all specified in the Set Temp menu. So these are set points that the user or the installer would input for their particular system. We have our warm weather shutdown set point, cold weather cutout, the melting set point, the storm set point, and the idling set point. And we'll look at each of these over the next few slides. We did discuss idling earlier in the training series, and we looked at idling and how we can use it to maintain a certain snow-free area ratio. So this would be operating our SNOMELT system to maintain a minimum temperature during the entire SNOMELT season. And the applications for doing so would be more commercial applications. Typically you wouldn't use idling in a residential application because it will increase dramatically your energy usage. In the Set Temp menu, you will enter the desired surface temperature of the slab when idling. Now we have quite the range here. You can turn idling off, which is actually the default position, or you can configure the idling set point to be somewhere between 20 and 95 degrees. Typically, an idling set point would be mid-20s. It could be high 20s in critical safety areas. So idling will preheat the slab so that you have a faster response time when it does snow. So if you keep the surface of the slab at a minimum temperature, say it's 25 degrees, when it snows, it won't take as long to bring that slab up to the melting temperature. So that's what provides you that faster response time. And because it will increase your energy usage, idling is recommended for commercial use only, typically not recommended for residential use. The melt set point is also a temperature set point that you would enter in the Set Temp menu of the 654. So this is the desired surface temperature of the slab during melting operation. Our default temperature is 36 degrees Fahrenheit. That is a standard temperature for the SNOMELT surface during melting. Typically it can go up to 38 degrees but no higher. When we get higher than that, as we looked at before, we're just going to be increasing our heat losses to the environment. Storm, as I mentioned, is a new feature for TechMar. It is similar to temporary idle if you are familiar with the temporary idle function in our earlier controls. What storm is a timed preheat of the slab. So if you hear on the weather report that we are expecting a snowfall sometime today, what you might want to do is to preheat your slab. So instead of starting from a cold start, we can bring that slab up to a certain set point as entered by the user, and it can stay at that storm set point until it sees snow. If it doesn't snow, that's okay. The system will return off. So it's different from idle in that idle is a permanent state that lasts throughout the snowmelt season. Storm is a temporary preheat. If we don't see snow during that time period, the system turns to its off state. It does not remain in storm. So it's a nice option if you're expecting a snowfall to occur, that you have the ability to bring your slab up to a certain temperature to allow for that faster response time. The storm set point is similar to the idle set point. You have the range from 20 to 95 degrees Fahrenheit. You can also set that off if you do not desire the storm operation for your system. You'll also enter in the run time that you want it to maintain that temperature for. And the range it can maintain that for goes from 30 minutes all the way to 24 hours. So it's entirely selected by the user or by the installer so that you have control over what that preheat temperature is and how long that preheat will last for. The 654 does feature warm weather shutdown, which is a way to save energy. So when the temperatures rise above your warm weather shutdown setting, we are not going to be seeing snow. The temperatures are higher than those where we do experience snowfall. And so the control will be prevented from entering the melt, idle, or storm states. Likewise, the 654 features cold weather cutout. So when we are at very cold temperatures, it is very inefficient to operate our snow melt system. We will not be able to get that slab surface up to temperature, certainly not efficiently. So when we see those very cold temperatures, like what we've shown here at minus 10 degrees Fahrenheit, then we're not going to operate our snow melt system. And when we see those very cold temperatures, snow is also extremely unlikely. There's an expression where it's too cold to snow. Now, snow is, of course, always possible, but it is less likely at those very cold temperatures because of the reduced water vapor in the air. Now we'll look at some different on-off methods and how they relate to TechMar in particular. So we'll look at the automatic start and stop, the automatic start and timed stop. We'll look at a new feature called EconoMelt that I think you're really going to like. We'll review the manual start and stop option, and we'll look at programmable schedules. Now, I did mention them in the last training block when we looked at the applications, that programmable schedules is a great option for car wash businesses. And lastly, we'll look at multi-zone snow melt systems. In particular, we'll look at features that we have called zone tracking and zone priority. The automatic start and stop operation is an operation that requires the installation of the snow ice sensor 090 or 094. We've shown it pictured on the left-hand side in the socket 091. Bringing your attention to the chart, we have two states. We have the idle or off state shown in red, and then we have the melt state shown in green. And here we've written it as auto melt because we're talking about the automatic start and stop cycle. So how do we move from the idle or off position into a melt state? Well, the automatic way of doing so would be for the 090 or 094 to detect water. When it detects moisture, right away we automatically start a melt cycle. Now, how do we come out of that melt cycle back to the idle or off state? We can do so automatically, and that happens when the sensor is dry and the add melt time has expired. We can do so by touching the stop key and forcing it out of that melt cycle. We can do so by using the away scene. That will also stop the melt cycle. And if the ambient temperature rises above our warm weather shutdown setting, that is also a way to return to the idle or off state. You'll notice at the bottom here we have a melt suspended state, and that is particular to the cold weather cutout. If we are in a melt cycle and the ambient temperature drops below our cold weather cutout setting, we're going to enter a suspended state. So we don't return to the idle or off state. The melt cycle is just suspended. And when we come out of cold weather cutout, so the ambient temperature rises sufficiently that we are no longer in cold weather cutout, we're going to resume that melt cycle. So that is a safety feature that the 654 has. Just because we've entered cold weather cutout, it doesn't mean the slab is dry. And that could cause some slippery conditions we're going to make sure when we can efficiently melt again that we do so to make sure that slab is dry. The automatic start with a time stop operation is possible when we install the snow sensor 095. So pictured here on the left hand side, it is the newest sensor for Tecmar snowmelt controls. It is compatible only with the 654 at this point. So how do we move from the idle or off state into a timed melt? Well, we do so when the 095 detects water. Once it detects water, we begin a timed melt cycle. And the length of that cycle is programmed by the installer or by the user. It is the manual melt runtime. When that elapses, we return to the idle or off state. We can also force it to the idle or off state by touching the stop key, changing the scene to the away scene, and if the outdoor temperature either rises above the warm weather shutdown setting or below the cold weather cutout setting, then we will also return to the off snowmelt state. You'll notice at the top here that we can resume that cycle whenever the 095 detects water. So if we are in a current timed melt cycle and the 095 sees moisture again, we will restart that melt cycle. So the manual melt runtime goes back to the beginning. If the ambient temperature drops below our cold weather cutout setting, then we have a melt suspended state. Whenever we come back out of cold weather cutout, we will continue to melt, and the length of that melt cycle will be whatever time was remaining from the previous timed melt. So whatever manual melt runtime was still remaining is how long it will continue to melt for, unless of course the 095 detects water again. EconoMelt is a new feature for the snowmelt control 654, and that will allow you to install a 090 or 094 snow ice sensor. But instead of having the automatic start, it will allow you to give it a manual start. And you still benefit from the automatic stop. Now, why would someone want to do that? Well, as the name implies, it is the economic way of doing snow melting. You can see in the picture, there is someone who is shoveling the driveway. So this allows you to mechanically remove the snow in your driveway, but there is always that thin layer of snow or ice which can be very slippery. So you can shovel the driveway and then start the melt cycle just to get rid of that thin layer of snow or ice that is impossible to remove through mechanical means. So it's the economic way of melting, hence the name EconoMelt. Of course, this will reduce the operating costs for a snow melt system. And because we are using that automatic stop, it does mean you have to use the 090 or 094 snow ice sensor. So let's take a look at the chart for EconoMelt. We have our off state and our melt state. How do we move from off to melt? By touching the melt key. So we have to touch this melt key to give it that manual start. That'll take it from off into a melt cycle. Now, when will it stop? It'll stop when the snow ice sensor is dry and the add melt time has elapsed. You can also force it off by touching the stop key or changing it to the away scene. Or if the ambient temperature rises above the warm weather shutdown setting, it will also move to the off state. Again, we have the melt suspended. So if we enter cold weather cutout, then we're going to suspend that melt cycle and it will be resumed when the ambient temperature rises above that cold weather cutout setting. The suspended melt operation can only occur if you are connected to a 090 or 094. That is why you will only see the suspended melt detail on these graphics for the automatic start and stop operation and for the EconoMelt operation where an 090 or 094 is required. The manual start and stop is always an option for the 654. So you can move from the idle or off state into a timed melt state by touching the melt key. So pushing this melt key on the 654. You can also do it by enabling the 654 through a gateway 483. And you can use a user switch to enable it into the melt state as well. We will talk about the use of gateways and user switches in the third feature set training segment, which is segment number 7 in this TechMar Snowmelt training webinar series. How do we move from the time melt back to the idle or off state? Well, it happens automatically when that manual melt runtime elapses, or again, we can force it off by touching stop at any time, changing it to the away scene at any time, and it happens automatically if the outdoor temperature either rises above the warm weather shutdown set point, or if it drops below the cold weather cutout set point, we will return to that idle or off position. Now, programmable schedules are a new feature for a TechMar Snowmelt control, and we added this feature particularly for car washes, but I'm sure you can think of other applications where programmable schedules could be used as well. In this case, I have a car wash, and my hours of operation are from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m., so that's when I want my Snowmelt system to be operational. So my event 1 will be 6 a.m., my event 2 will be 7 p.m. So at 6 a.m. I move from my off state into my melt state. And I stay in that melt state until 7 o'clock, which is schedule event 2. We've given you the option of having up to 4 events. I can't think of an application where you might want 4 events, but if you come up with one, then the option is there for you. Again, we can force our way out of the melt by pushing the stop key, changing the scene to away, and it happens automatically if the outdoor temperature either rises above the warm weather shutdown set point, or if it drops below the cold weather cutout set point, we will return to that idle or off position. We'll take a look at multi-zone systems. So what's really nice about the 654 is that we can connect up to 12 654s so that we can have up to 12 snowmelt zones in a single system. So that's something that people have been waiting for a while, and we're happy to deliver it now with the 654. In this image, we show you 4 zones. We have our driveway, our front walkway, our side walkway, and a patio. In this type of scenario, zones 1 and 2 would likely be my high priority zones. I want to make sure my driveway and my front walkway are clear of snow. The side walkway may be of lesser importance, as with the patio. What's nice about the 654 is it gives you the option of installing a single snow ice sensor 090 or 094. So here I've shown the 090094 installed in the driveway, so it's in zone 1. This is giving me my automatic operation. Now, I don't want to install snow ice sensors in the remaining zones, maybe because of the cost factor of adding 3 additional snow ice sensors. So I can just use the 1 in zone 1 and use slab sensors in the remaining 3 zones. Zones 2, 3, and 4 can track zone 1. So we will track the amount of time it takes for this melt cycle. So how many hours from when the sensor detected moisture to when it was dry. Each of those zones will have that same melt cycle. What's nice though is that you can program individual add melt times in each of those sensors. So maybe for my driveway, I need an additional melt time of 2 hours. Maybe my front walkway, I need an additional melt time of 30 minutes. I have that flexibility to program individual add melt times in each of my zones, and they can all track the first zone that has the automatic snow ice sensor. So a great way to add the automatic operation to each of your zones and keep your installation costs down. In multi-zone systems, as you know, we often have to consider zone priority. And zone priority is something that's considered in accordance to the capacity of our heat source. If our heat source has enough capacity to accommodate all of our zones at design conditions, then we don't have to worry about priority. However, what's typically the case is our heat source is sized for maybe 1 or 2 zones at design conditions, the high priority zones. And in that case, we do have to specify how the other zones should operate. The nice thing about the 654 is that we have 3 levels of priority for hydronic systems and 3 levels of priority for electric systems. So it really lets you customize the operation of the snowmelt system in accordance to your particular heat source and how that has been sized. In summary, for this presentation, we looked at the temperature set points of the 654, so how you can configure the idle, melt, and storm set points. Storm in particular being a new feature for the 654, and that would be a temporary preheat of the slab, which we could use if we were expecting a snowfall later in the day. We could bring that slab up to the storm set point in preparation of the snowfall. We also looked at warm weather shutdown and cold weather cutout. Next, we talked about different on-off methods. So the automatic start and stop with the 090 or 094, the automatic start and time stop with the snow sensor 095. We talked about EconoMelt, which is a new feature for the 654. It's what we jokingly referred to in-house as it was being developed as the shovel and melt feature. So it lets you to use SnowMelt for your system, but do it in an economic way. So you can use a mechanical snow removal method first, and then only use your SnowMelt system to melt that thin layer of snow or ice that mechanical snow removal methods are unable to remove. We talked about the manual start and stop, and programmable schedules, in particular how it's a great application for car wash businesses. Lastly, we looked at multi-zone systems, and we talked about the new zone tracking feature where we can install a single 090 or 094 sensor for that automatic operation and have other zones track that sensor. So we get automatic operation in all of our zones with a single 090 or 094. And lastly, we looked at zone priority and how we can customize the operation of the snowmelt system based on the capacity of our heat source and the needs of our zones. Now I hope you'll join me for the next segment, segment 6, which will focus on a different set of features for the snowmelt control 654.